Good evening, Booktopians, and welcome to the first edition of Booktopia TV Live for 2021. And tonight, we're thrilled to be joined by entrepreneur, artist, head psychologist, and founder of the Indigo Project, and now author of the new book, Darkness is Golden, Mary Hoang. Mary, welcome to Booktopia.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, when I started to write some questions for tonight, I was writing the word read, as in like, I read this book and readers of this book, but on reflection, I don't think read is an accurate word. This book is more of an experience, I would say. There's exercises, there's audio experiences, even a Spotify playlist that you can listen to while you read, in addition to all the wonderful things that you've written in the book. Why do you think it was so important for people to be immersed when approaching this kind of information?
Well, I think how we learn is so unique. So obviously people can read through learning a book. Like I remember a book that I received in my 20s that absolutely changed my life. But when we think about psychological processes and these ideas that are spoken a lot in self-help, like the self-help world, which is like self-worth, developing self-compassion, letting go, love yourself. I think these need to be experienced. And so when you put together a book, personally for me, and I thought, how can I really give people the full experience of what self-love or self-compassion or letting go of that shitty relationship, what would that actually feel like? And I think that's kind of what makes the book special in a way.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also mention before we go any further that if anybody is watching and they want to ask a question of Mary, feel free to do so in the comments and we will do our best to get to them. And also just a little note that there may be some background noise from roadwork that Mary is experiencing outside her house today.
Pretty loud. It's quietening down.
So you have this creative approach to mental health and psychology that you do. Can you explain a little bit about what that approach is and how you've manifested it in Darkness is Golden?
Absolutely. So I guess my inspiration for how I see mental health and the Indigo Project is really around my work with street kids. So when I started working with street kids in my 20s as an early psychologist, I really started to recognize that street kids weren't that keen on coming to therapy. And if you really think about it, us adults we're not super excited about coming to therapy too. And I guess that's because there's a lot of stigma. There's a sense that psychologists maybe are a little bit out of touch. Therapy itself for people who have disorders or severe diagnoses who are kind of like on the edge of the cliff. And it's, like even my mum would say, oh, are you working with crazy people? So there was this, I think, when I started in the field, there was this huge belief that therapy was for people who had really severe issues. And when I look at my life and how I've grown up and some of my childhood experiences and adulthood, I think, gosh, like there are so many things that I didn't learn at school, which I think is really important for me to know. And I think that a therapist is someone that could really walk someone through that path of the things that they didn't get to experience and learn, how to let go of those difficult relationships, developing self-awareness, creating or changing the life, building a life that they want. There's just so many things, emotion regulation. And so I guess my approach to therapy has been, how can we really, take this beautiful science that we have and bring it in a way that's so like easily digestible and so that it's relatable and people feel like it's okay for me to go to therapy. I'm not alone. I'm just going through everyday stuff that everyone else is going through, and it's okay.
Let's discuss darkness a little bit, as it's central to the book. You invite readers to step into the dark and enter a haunted house and then meet skeletons and monsters. And so a lot of your concepts are grounded in this kind of very familiar to people and yet very potentially frightening imagery. Can you tell us why you chose that grounding for this book?
I think it's something that we can all relate to. There's, the idea of the haunted house, the monsters under the bed, the spirits, the things that we don't know, the fear of the unknown. And, so much, I think, of the books that I've read have sometimes brought the science in a way that we can really glaze over the science and the really juicy parts of what makes us human, and facing nobody wants to face the difficult things in their lives and the painful emotions, but it's kind of like, for me, the book is like a Pixar version of um of dealing with life. In a way, you've got to make it cute, you've got to make it a picture in people's minds and something that people can talk about, because otherwise it is really difficult to get people to deal with things that can be difficult and painful.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note to people who are considering buying the book and maybe turned off by this talk of haunted houses and skeletons and monsters, is that it's also done in a very positive way. The darkness is golden, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. I think at the heart of, being a therapist has been such an honor for me. And people often say, "Oh, you must be, so tired or so depressed listening to people's stories of their lives, and it must really get you down." And as you've said about the book, it's not, the book isn't this depressing book where you just kind of think of all the things that haven't gone right in your life. It's, as a therapist, it's been the most incredible honor to be with people on their life's journeys and realize how resilient people are, how capable, how imaginative, creative, beautiful, worthy, deserving, and to see that journey like happen for people is why I love doing the work that I do. And something that I absolutely wanted to translate into this book is that people are incredible, and what a way to experience that, like through yourself, through your own hands, and the things that you do through this book, you can discover this amazing potential within yourself.
Now, you went on your own mental health journey while you were writing this book, and you share that quite openly throughout the chapters. Your own kind of journey is woven in. Um, can you tell us a little bit about what you went through and how you managed to create Darkness is Golden while dealing with a lot of darkness and a heavy period yourself?
I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend going through a really huge breakdown and trying to write a book at the same time with deadlines, but it kind of had to be done, and I guess that was it was meant to be that way. So what was really challenging was that when I first started writing the book, my father passed away. So he was ill for about 8 months prior to that. But as I started writing the book, he did pass away, and it was a really challenging time in my life. Not only the grief that I was trying to move through, but the difficulty in moving through that grief because of how I had set my life up. And that was, I love achieving, I love doing a really good job. I want to please people. I'm always being super conscientious and thinking about others. And I think that there was a point where having a business, taking care of a lot of people, I really wasn't taking care of myself. That's really hard to admit, given that my role is to be really teaching people how to, walking with people as they're getting better through their lives. And I guess that I just wasn't really doing that for myself, and losing my father kind of really brought everything to the surface that was just underneath there. So I was functioning, but I think underneath it was just waiting to come up. And writing a book at the same time where it was, okay, I'm going to write a book about darkness is gold. And then it was like, I'm going through my darkness and trying to find the light through it. And that was extremely difficult, given that I hadn't written a book before. I was trying to find my voice as a writer. I was being very critical and felt very insecure about my abilities to even express what I wanted to express, despite the fact I'd done this work for 10 years. And, I can only really say it now because I think I wanted to give up countless times. And I had to kind of go back into my past. I had to look at why am I trying so hard to please everyone? Why do I want to achieve so much and think that that is what is going to make me worthy and valuable in this world, and liked and admired and respected? And this process that I'm encouraging and guiding people through Darkness is Golden is exactly the same process that I went through myself. And yes, it was difficult. I guess it's easier when you don't have this kind of all these imaginary eyes on you as you go through it. But it was worth it. You know, it was absolutely worth it to be able to even bring to the readers like a sense of you know, you're not alone on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were chatting before we went live about how I just finished reading the book today. And I don't call it an experience lightly, as I do in my introduction. It really, really is an amazing, kind of beautiful achievement. And it's amazing that you were able to create something like this when you were going through so much. So, you know, well done.
Thank you.
So each chapter in the book has exercises for readers to take on as they progress through the rooms of the house. You know, things like meeting your monsters and strengthening your mental torch so that you can see better in the darkness. And of course, there's audio exercises and guided meditations as well. What do you think readers will get if they follow all of the exercises throughout the book?
I guess my deepest desire and hope and wish for readers is that they transform in a really deep way where their perception of themselves, of the world that they live in, their relationships is fundamentally like shifted at the core. This book, you know, as you say, is an experience, but it's also like this kind of rite of passage. And for me, transformation is the sense that if we think about, you know, transformation that a butterfly might take, it's never going to be that cocoon again. It's huge metamorphosis. It's not just change, like, oh, I'm just going to fix a habit of mine, or I'm going to get fit for summer. I think it's this fundamental shift in how I perceive myself. And I think that's where these concepts that sometimes can be difficult to grasp at times, self-love, self-worth, self-compassion, deep understanding and finding yourself. I think if readers can have this opportunity to connect with themselves in this really real way, the way that they're going to see the world is profoundly different. And I think there's a quote in the front of the book which is about sleepwalking through life and going through this transformation is about waking up, where you're not living your life from this subconscious place of what your parents might have told you is good and right, or what our culture or society has told us as beautiful or amazing or successful, or what our friends are doing. I think it's living your life by your own terms and for you.
Now, for anybody who's just tuned in, you are free to ask questions in the comments. If you have a question for Mary Hoang and you would like to know more about her or her work, or indeed Darkness is Golden and the subjects that we're talking about, then please feel free to do so in the comments and we'll do our best to get to them. Don't be shy. Now, you're talking about like kind of a huge tapestry of mental health concepts and issues. And I think it can often sound quite daunting when people are wanting to go on this journey of self-transformation, all of the things that you need to address. And yet I think one of the powerful things that you do in this book is you really do distill it down into some really key component elements that kind of can talk quite broadly about things. Can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of took this really broad, big idea of self-transformation and then managed to bring it down to something that's, you know, 200 pages and quite manageable?
That wasn't easy. I probably wrote the book about 6 million times to get it to where I wanted it to be. But I guess over the last 10 years, working with people, you know, as a therapist and in groups and workshops and, you know, in corporate industries, is, you know, the things that people want answers to keep coming up over and over and over again. And we have, despite being very unique individuals, I did notice like a pattern in terms of what people were having issues and troubles with their emotions, like dealing with difficult emotions, relationships, setting boundaries, like the relationship with yourself, like what are my needs? So what are my values? What are my priorities? Difficulties dealing with the past or facing the past. How do we let go of habits or situations that have been painful for us? How can we create a life for ourselves? And so over the years being a therapist, I discovered that this path of transformation is very kind of specific. We don't start at let's create a vision for ourselves and kind of gallop off into the sunset with this, mansion that and holidays and all these things that we've kind of thought about that we want for our lives. How we actually create a vision for our lives is actually through an understanding of our darkness and of our experiences that we've actually had. This is how we discover what our needs truly are, what we value the most, what we want to prioritize, because these are our own individual, unique needs and wants and desires. And that's why it's so specific, this book, and so detailed. And in some ways, if you look at it from afar, it can feel complex because there's so much to life. There's so much to this idea that we want to be able to find connection with ourselves because we've been so disconnected and feeling lost in the world at times. And I say, I guess my editor and I have been saying, we just got to hit this thing at all angles. We're going to go, okay, well, and for some people, some things work really well, and people go, whoa, that thing, that exercise, that's going to be my thing. And for some people, it's a lot of things, and one thing might stand out as something that didn't really work for them, and that's okay. And so writing a book that's multifaceted and multi-layered gives people the opportunity to somehow individualize their journey through the book as well.
Yeah. I wanted to discuss the audio elements of the book with you as well. Where did it come from? How can readers access it? And we'll answer that first, and then I've got a question about Spotify.
Okay, so how did the audio book come about?
Yeah, how did it come about?
Yeah. Well, for the longest time, I've really believed that music is medicine and it should be incorporated into therapy. And over particularly the last 4 years, I've been working with a music psychologist who has really helped me to work with how are we going to use music therapeutically in a way that we can get people in touch with their emotions, because it can be very difficult just in talk therapy for people to access those emotions. And I think that music has that ability to really kind of cut to the core of how we're feeling, and it kind of bypasses the I don't want to feel all the protection mechanisms that we might have. So in the last 4 years, I've been working really closely with a music composer, Richard Lucanen, who designed all the audio experiences of the book and composed them in a way to really touch people and to get people immersed, to kind of build a little safe space for people to really get into the exercises. And how people access the audio in the book, I think given what's happened over the last year and the pandemic, it's really fortunate that we were able to use a QR code for the front of the book. Everyone from yay high to our grandmas can use a QR code in their phone to access the audio, and it's kind of divided into music for reading the book. So I really just love creating experiences for people. Like, how great is it? Just sit down, put the music on, and be held in some way. And then the other side of the audio experiences are the sonic embodiments and the meditations, that when you see a headphone symbol in the book, then you can go back and you can kind of go onto the playlist and listen to those experiences.
We actually have a question from somebody in the audience, from D. Joseph Aaron, who asks, when did you first notice the link between music and mindful meditation, and how did you develop it further? And again, a reminder, if you do want to ask questions, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, Joseph, 4 years ago, Richard and I started a experience called Listen Up, and we started experimenting with creating a musical journey for listeners, for participants who would come into a room, and kind of grew. It was a monthly experience where people would listen to music in the dark, and it became one of our most popular offerings at the Indigo Project. We had 60 people every month coming and listening to music, and we discovered that when we give people permission to be in their bodies and to guide them into being in their bodies, music had this effect of being able to have this cathartic effect. So it would bring people into a really deep experience of their emotions that was what we say like kind of trapped in their bodies or kind of behind in their subconscious or something that's kind of put aside. We would bring it to the surface, and given the space that we created, very safe space, people could laugh or cry or feel or imagine in this space. And when we started getting feedback from people, people were saying it was like a psychedelic journey, like they felt resolved in some way. And it was with Rich and with the music psychologist that we decided to design some experiments around it. And yeah, we published these experiences and these findings in a journal, and it's been incredible to see that link right in front of our eyes between music and well-being.
And I wanted to ask you as well about the Spotify playlist, the 10-hour Spotify playlist that you have, which is a great playlist. It's got like John Hopkins and Sigur Rós and Niels Fromm, and like I've been listening to it while I've been working, so because I find it's really good for flow as well. How did you go about like what's the formula for choosing a song that kind of fits what you're trying to do with the playlist?
Yes. Typically, music without vocals is what allows people to be cocooned in the sound. And we often don't want to choose music that is too like repetitive in a way that has a sense of like a chorus in it, where people can kind of know what's coming ahead. There's a sense of kind of like floatiness to it. And personally, for me, the way that I choose music is that I just listen to a lot of it and I experience what it feels like for me. Like, am I feeling frustrated? Am I feeling like I want to turn it off? Am I feeling like I want to cry? I'm probably I just feel like I'm this kind of barometer for the music. And throughout all of the many, many listen ups that we've held over the last 4 years, we know what gets people, in their bodies, and we know what really pulls those heartstrings.
Excellent. So I wanted to visit a couple of concepts. So there's this concept about how we avoid certain emotions and we like to avoid kind of the bad stuff. But you talk about emotions not being the bad guy. Can you expand a little on that?
Well, I guess we can, from a scientific point of view, emotions, we like to put judgment on whether it's good or bad, or it feels good or it doesn't feel good. And from a scientific perspective, what we're looking for is to really feel the full range of emotions. And this is what is known as Emo Diversity. So researchers have looked into this concept and have understood that the more emotions that we feel, the more likely this is going to predict our mental health, even our physical health as well. And if we start to put emotions into the sense of good or bad, that means we start to go, I don't want to feel this, and we suppress emotions, which doesn't actually shift them in any fundamental way. We still experience them. And if we do this chronically, where we suppress our emotions, we actually cause them to become even stronger. And so we can actually never really run away from them. And if we think about them, emotions guide us through our lives. They give us the ability to enjoy ice cream, to enjoy that beautiful sunset, to know certain relationships that we don't want to be in. Like they're just messengers. And I think that we try to shoot the messenger a lot, but in fact, they're just our guidance. They're our inner compass that help us to kind of walk through life in a really meaningful way.
Now, as a former anthropology student, there was a section that really stood out to me, and I thought was really interesting. And I've written this question. It goes for like a paragraph, so I'll try and get my thoughts concise. I apologize if this sounds rambly, but there's a section in the book where you talk about the importance of ceremonies, and how in contemporary Western society, we don't have a lot of them anymore. Like there's no longer kind of the official set of ceremonies that you would have to become an adult, for example, with like, getting married young and purchasing the house and things like that. But then you introduce some exercises that take on the form of ceremonies to kind of help you as you move through the house and move through your mental health journey. Can you explain what the importance of ceremony is and the ways in which you've approached it so that people can kind of incorporate it in, kind of low-key ways into their lives?
Absolutely. I guess, ceremony and this concept of rite of passage, this, it's like this tunnel where we will never be the same again. And we talked about the book being like a rite of passage. I guess to give some context, when we think about rite of passage and ceremony in our modern lives, we are missing these moments where we come together as a community and we honor each other for the life changes that we are making and the new responsibilities that we're taking on, whether that be from a girl becoming a woman, a boy becoming a man. There are many, many moments in our lives, especially as our population gets older, we are forgetting this ceremony and this rite of passage of becoming an elderly person who has the wisdom to share and to give to the rest of the community. I think one of the most important rites of passage that we fail to really have as a community is when things end for us. And life is a cycle. There are always going to be new beginnings, and we always look forward to new beginnings, but we kind of dismiss this idea of an ending. And particularly in our modern age with so many relationships that we have a lot of friendships, we have a lot of superficial relationships. We also have a lot of meaningful relationships. We date more, we have more partners. And I feel that being an observer in people's relationships as a therapist, we're not really taking the time to honor the relationship for what it was and what it gave us and what it taught us about what we didn't want. And we also don't take that opportunity to let go and forgive the person that we were perhaps in a relationship with. This can be romantic, but this can also extend to family members and to friends as well. And so my idea of bringing ceremony and rite of passage into the book was to bring this modern form of rite of passage and ceremony back into people's lives, where we can truly say to ourselves, this is the experience that I've had, this is what I'm going to take from it, and this is what I'm going to leave. And for us also then to have that experience and to go back into our friendship circles and say, I want you to see me for now the person that I am, and to honor that. And I think that's how we grow as people and as communities and as a society, is that if we can really acknowledge people for the changes that they're making in their lives, especially when the change has been difficult.
I think that's a nice segue into the next question that I have, which is that you have this beautiful chapter at the end of the book, which I finished this afternoon, and it's beautiful and it's poignant. It's all about death, and it was it's an emotional experience to read it. I found it very, very touching. And there's you have a death meditation that you can do as well, which I avoided doing because I knew it would make me a wreck for the interview. But it's such a beautiful chapter to read and so touching. What was the experience of putting that together? Because you talk about your experience with your father, and I imagine it must have been a really tough piece of work to write.
It was originally the chapter on death was originally supposed to be the first chapter. So I am guessing for a lot of new authors, the first chapter is probably the chapter that gets rewritten the most. And over time, it ended up being the last chapter of the book, and it absolutely belongs there. It was an excruciating chapter to write, and I think that I experienced a lot of my own healing through reliving and rewriting my story with my dad and the lessons and the wisdom that came from that, because it really was, when I think about my life now and the journey that I've taken, it was about how am I going to live my life in a way that's not only sustainable, but that really honors my life in connection with his passing. So I would say, experiencing my father's death was that moment for me, the moment that shifted everything. But it didn't shift everything in an instant. It shifted things over years, a really, really, really long time for me. And so when I look back on that chapter, I think, gosh, we can't all experience death in terms of, no one's really lived to tell the story of what it's like. Well, I guess there's some past life experience, a near-death experience, but how can I give people an experience of something that we will all go through in our lives, that no one will ever be able to express what it is, but has the most immense power for transformation and really waking us up to the ways in which we are procrastinating on our lives, the way in which we are not honoring ourselves and being kind or loving towards ourselves or others. Like, what else has the power to do that than this kind of simple notion that life is scarce, and here we are living it, and it's not going to last forever. So what are we going to do with it?
So well put. And it's I just want to emphasize for everybody watching that it is a really beautiful piece of writing. Yeah, very, very moving and touching. And let's change tack now.
Start crying.
All right, so it's New Year, time of resolution and change for a lot of people, and great time to pick up a book like this. What advice would you give to people who are looking to make resolutions and change in their lives this year?
Go slow. Go slow. Make change and transformation sustainable. I think that we also have the rest of our lives to really experience the fullness of all we are. And there is absolutely no rush to get it all right this year, particularly in the light of last year, because 2021 is my year. Like, don't put the pressure on it. It's a lot. I think we just need to take it slow. And I think the lessons of 2020 and the lessons of our life, past life, everything that we've experienced, these wisdoms are to be savored, I think, in a way, and wanting to bypass the messiness to get to the goal really shortchanges us in some way. And so if people were to read the book, if people are on this journey, I also recommend people watch Soul, this Pixar movie that just came out, because it really highlights that I know we're on this search for meaning and purpose, but at the same time, here we are, and how amazing and beautiful it is to watch a leaf fall from a tree and watch it, all the way down until it graces and touches the floor. Like, it said everything for me, this movie, and I think that's where it's at, is that we want to change, but it's right here in this moment. How can we just be with it and find connection with ourselves and share this moment with others in a beautiful way?
So before we wrap up, we've got a couple of questions from the audience, and quite a few comments from people who are very excited to read your book now. But we've got a question from Diana. She asks, what advice do you have for my daughter who is looking to be a psychologist but wants to keep it real like you are?
I would say that it's very important to know what you enjoy. Like, I enjoyed music, food, dance. And this is what I started bringing into my therapy when I was working with street kids. I think we need to bring our own individual touch to it. We need to have therapy ourselves and experience what it feels like to sit on the other side and taken on that journey. I think it's just so important to continually learn and be given permission to make mistakes as someone who is hoping to become a therapist, is get out there and like hustle with life. That's the kind of I would want to sit opposite.
And one more question from the audience, which is on a slightly different subject. There's lots of talks in academic circles about the relationship between psychedelics, psychology, and life-changing experiences. Do you think that psychedelic journeys are something that will be viable in Australia in the not-too-distant future?
Absolutely. I've been, in a couple of weeks, I'm actually taking a part of a psychedelics therapy kind of course that's run by an organization called Mind Medicine, and it's for practitioners, psychologists, counselors, other people in the field who are going to be the first ones in Australia who are going to be learning about how to use psychedelics as part of therapy. So I really believe that there is such a huge, it's really going to be shifts the whole landscape, I think, of mental health, given its ability to really kind of cut to the core of deep emotions and experiences that may have been challenging to reach through other means.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's about it. We don't want to keep you for too much longer. Mary Hoang, thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing your journey with us. And Darkness is Golden is available now at booktopia.com.au, and we will have some copies in stock very, very soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.